All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tea, Tentacles, and Talk, cozy conversations about LGBTQ plus romance. I'm your host, Chloe Archer. I'm also a writer of MM, sci-fi, and paranormal rom-com, sometimes with tentacles. Before we get started, I have a few quick announcements to make. First and foremost, book 3 of my Tentacular Tales series, When a Man Loves an Alien, is available for pre-order on Amazon and will be coming out May 26th. Also, earlier this month, I was interviewed by the amazing audiobook narrator John Solo for his Talk to the Beard show. We had a blast talking about all kinds of fun stuff, including where I got some inspiration for some quirky things in my books. If you want to go ahead and watch that episode, I'll put the link in the show notes. So that's it for updates from me. This month, I have a great episode for you. So take a moment to make yourself a beverage, get cozy, and join us for a fun conversation. My guest on the podcast today is the wonderful Kiki Clark. Kiki, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. For those who don't know you, let me read your bio here. A small town Michigan girl, Kiki has enjoyed reading since she first picked up a YA fantasy novel as a child. After that, she devoured everything she could get her hands on and dreamed of one time writing her own books that touched people's hearts. In her early 20s, she discovered LGBTQ romances and had a realization. These were her people, and this was where she belonged. Nearly 10 years later, she proudly joined the ranks of authors releasing character-driven, emotionally satisfying books showcasing that everyone deserves to find love. So, thank you so much.
I've never heard my bio read out loud before. I was like, man.
I know, it's kind of surreal, right?
I was like, oh yeah, I guess I did right. It's so dramatic. No, I loved it.
Awesome. Well, this is Tea and Talk, so I always encourage my guests to join me with a beverage. Today, I have a nice green tea that is colloquially called popcorn tea in Japan that involves like sorghum and like toasted rice and stuff, and it's quite nice. Yes. Do you have a beverage with you today?
I do.
Ooh.
I don't drink a lot of tea or coffee, so I get my caffeine through Diet Mountain Dew.
Caffeine of champions.
Yes, yes,
huh?
yes. I usually drink like 1 or 2 cans in the morning, and I was busy getting ready for this and doing some other things, so I was like, oh, I better grab another one. So I grabbed a second can so I can be on top of my stuff for this interview, for the hard-hitting questions.
Right. Now, I feel also like I've sort of hit that point in middle age, apparently, where I need caffeine to function most days. So I've already had black tea and coffee in the morning, and now it's green tea. So I'm kind of like trying to do the light version.
Trailing off throughout the day.
I start out strong and I lighten off the closer I get toward evening, so I'm not up all night on the caffeine. But yes, I definitely need it to function.
That's funny.
All right, so we're going to talk about all kinds of fun stuff today, including your latest release. But why don't we start off first by asking questions that I know a lot of our listeners, whether they're readers or writers or aspiring writers, want to know about you and writing.
Okay.
So why don't you tell us, what was your first published work, and tell us a little bit about it, especially for folks who aren't familiar with you.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my very first published book was The Alpha and His King, which is the first Kincaid Pack book. It came out in January 2020, and people may remember 2020 was a terrible year. But I didn't know that in January. I was like, yeah, let's start this author journey. No pressure. So if you're not familiar with me, I write contemporary and paranormal. But my first one was paranormal, and it has shifters and witches and fated mates and all kinds of spicy goodness. So it did pretty well. My next book coming out is going to be the last book in that series, so that's people are very excited about it.
That's kind of like a momentous moment to come to the end. We'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that later, about what might
Okay.
be next for
Mhm.
you. But, for me as a newbie writer, like I have this vision of the end of a series that I'm writing, but it feels
Yeah.
far away. So anyway,
Yes.
we'll totally talk more.
Yes. That was me. I had a little bit of a plan, but not enough of a plan that like as the series continued, I was like, oh, I should have had more of a plan. So you're just kind of like flying by the seat of your pants, trying to make sure everything makes sense and fits. And yeah.
Right. Well, I
Yeah.
guess that maybe kind of leads into a natural question that gets asked a lot in terms of like, are you a plotter or a pantser, or as I like to call it, a discovery writer? How would you describe yourself in that kind of spectrum?
So I would say I am a little bit of both. I
Mm-hmm.
tend to, and I started, so my very first book, I did outline the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
It did
Okay.
not follow the outline very well.
Sure.
But I had originally like submitted it to a publisher. And
Mm.
so you didn't have to have the completed manuscript at that point. They just
Oh,
wanted like,
wow.
a certain number of words, blah, blah, blah. And then you just needed to like let them know what the rest of the book would
Where
entail.
was
So I
it?
was like, well, I got to figure out what the rest of the book entails then. They
Right.
passed on it. And I
Mm.
was like, oh, okay, it's fine. I'm fine. And so when I eventually came back to it after, I cried profusely for several months, I was like, I'm going to write it myself and I'm just going to publish it myself. Like that's fine. That's totally cool. That's the majority of what I read.
Yeah.
And so as I started working on it, I realized that some of the things that I had included in that synopsis that I had sent to the publisher. And so like, I'm like, this isn't really working. And I actually want to do this instead of that. So for the second book, I didn't outline, and
Mm.
it was very difficult for me. Like second books are always really difficult to write, especially if your first one has any sort of success,
Mm.
because you have never, at least for me, having never had that, okay, there are people waiting now for the next book in the
Right.
series. Like you don't want to disappoint them. You want it
Yes.
to be as good as the first one, if
Mm.
not better. And so there is all of this pressure on you. And then I did. I wrote it without an outline.
Mm.
I remember telling people, I think I did like a Facebook Live in my group or something. And I remember saying like, I knew like three things going into that book, like three events that happened, like
Yeah.
how it was going to end, and like two other like very important moments. Otherwise, I just kind of winged it. And oh my God, it was so stressful. And so since then I've kind of adapted
Mm.
how I do it. Sometimes I go in with a full-fledged outline, and my outlines aren't super detailed. I break it down to like, okay, I know I want it to be X number of words. I know I write on average 3,500 word chapters. So that
Mm.
means I need this many chapters. I
Okay.
I number it, and then I just give like myself a few sentences. Like
Mm.
I know I want this to happen, and this, and then this, and then I kind of discover, like you said, like a little discovery,
Yeah.
all the fun things that happened in between then. But I really got into that style of outlining because that is how E.M. Lindsay and I outline for our co-writes.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay.
yeah, like
Very
we get
cool.
on a Zoom and we have like our Google Doc pulled up, and we're just like, okay, for the first chapter, this has to happen. And then, okay, and then this. And then we're like, well, at some point we have to have this. So I'll like scroll down to like chapter 12 and be like, okay, right around here, we need this to happen. And then we just kind of fill things in. So that really got me into the habit of actually doing it that way. And it's been very helpful. I can't always go in with a full outline
Yeah.
because I just don't always know everything that's going to happen. And I like to be able to leave creative room, especially the book that I'm finishing up right now that's about to come out. I would outline a few chapters and then I'd write those, and then as I'm nearing the end of what I had outlined, I would outline a few more, always with kind of like the idea of where it was ending, because it's not just that book's ending, it's the series ending. So like kind of building to that moment throughout it. It's a convoluted process, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that for people who are listening, especially writers or aspiring writers, the thing that I've been learning as a newbie is that there is no one way. That is sort of the universal standard or what works for everyone, that it's kind of a process of trial and error, and you have to sort of learn what works well for you in terms of going forward. Like I tend to veer more toward discovery writer. I'm more of like a big picture planner where I can think about like, okay, there's X number of books that are going to be in the series, and I kind of know the main arc of each one and how each one ends. And
that is, I feel like those are the most important things.
Right. But I don't know how I get from A to Z in each book. Like I've got the beginning and the end, and then in the middle, it's just a bunch of like, you know?
A friend of mine literally asked me the other day, she was like, I want to write like this next series. I want there to be like a series arc, like an overarching arc for the 4 books in the series. She's like, do you have any tips? And I was like, don't wing it for 6 books. That's my number 1 tip. And she's not like a big outliner. So getting into the habit of doing a little bit more outlining has been a little bit hard for her. But I was like, basically, I'm like, if I could give myself a piece of advice before going into another series, I would say, know how it's going to end before I put any words down for book 1. Because once a book is published, you can't go back and fill things in. Like, oh, I should have introduced XYZ in book 1, but I didn't think about it until I'm writing book 3. So it definitely is. I'm like, know how it's going to end, and know what, like with hers, it's going to be a little bit like suspensey. I'm like, so know what the bad guys, like who they are, and what the good guys know about them in each book. I'm like, if you don't know anything else, know that. Like, how much would they know in book 1 and then book 2? And like, so you know how much you have to sprinkle in so that you're building that momentum, that suspense. So people are like, oh, who is it? What's going to happen? You know?
Right. Where like, I know there are some authors who are able to kind of like hold back books and like write several.
Yes, like write the entire series.
Yeah. I mean, I'm too impatient. I couldn't wait that long. Like, and partly like I think I like thrive on getting feedback and like liking and like, oh, okay, I can do more or less of something in the next book. And, you know, but there is a lot of kind of like practical utility to back if that's something you could actually do.
Yes, I am going to
financially possible, but like,
right. And I'm going to try and do that at some point, like maybe with like a trilogy or something like that, and try and do like get them all written and then be able like to not necessarily rapid release, but release them within like a month or 2 of each other and like have them all done. Like, cause you can build the series momentum. Readers can get very excited about it. Like my Kincaid Pack books have done well. But it has taken 3 years for these 6 books. And part of that is because I wrote the first 3 all in 2020 and then was like, I need something else. Like I have to like jump around. I get like burnt out, especially on something that's very world building heavy, like the paranormal books, where I created the rules, but then I have to follow them and I have to remember what all of the rules are. So like it's a lot more thinky thoughts that have to happen as I'm writing compared to like a contemporary, like my Leather and Chrome books, where yes, there is overlapping characters, but it's not the world building that goes into the KP one. So it's a little bit like a palate cleanser. But then I did too many of those in a row, and now I'm like, I need a break from those now. I have to like, I'm a series jumper, which I know some readers hate because they like to read completed series, and I'm like, that's not me.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is also like as a creator, you need to fill your well, as they say. And
Yes.
sometimes, yeah, staying in one, it can get kind of draining, or you need something to kind of like respark or revive
Yes.
the creative juices. I'm starting a second series this summer and I'm really excited about that. And I found like it's kind of helping me with some things
Get excited again.
yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and I think if readers really love what you write, they will stick around. They may grumble. They may
That's true.
grumble in the background,
They'll
but they
send you a
will.
message. When's the next Kincaid pack? When's the next Leather and Chrome book? And I'll be like, I don't know, but stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed to my newsletter.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you do like the Clifton Strengths at all, which I know like, a lot of writers are into, and Becca Syme, and I did mine
Yeah.
a while ago, and like my number one is futuristic, which has a lot of
That's in my
benefits.
top 5, but it's not my number one.
Yeah, it's my number one. And so like I can think out, like I have several series mapped out, right, that I haven't even
Right.
started yet, that I know like the large overarching arc of and how many books there will be, but haven't
Yeah.
been able to get to them. And I was talking to another writer friend of mine, Megan Maslow, who's been on the podcast before,
Mhm.
and she was like, don't write more than 3 series at once. Ongoing series at once. She's like, ask me how I know.
Ask me how I know.
And I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, oh, but the temptation is strong.
It is. It is. Right. Like this year, I'm like, okay, I have to start wrapping up some things because I have so many more ideas for stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I can't start something else until I finish up some of these series that I have going on. And yeah.
Right. Because
Yeah.
I do think one of the greatest sins a writer can commit to their reader is not finishing a series.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Like I know that from my perspective as a reader, where I've had like things I've been deeply invested in, and then the writer's like, I just can't finish this.
Yeah.
And then it just stays stuck in this
Yep.
like, hiatus forever. And you're like, oh, so
Yes.
so I'm trying to keep that kind of stuff in mind too. Yeah. But
And I think that's why like a lot of readers like to wait for series to be complete.
yeah, they've
And
been
or
burned
at
sometimes.
least complete one series. Because I remember when I first started, another author who was very, very large in our genre, like messaged me and was like, this is a good series, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, I'm thinking about writing like a contemporary in between like the second and third book. And she was like, okay, but like do a standalone, don't do another series. And I was like, but series sell really well. Like people like to, get invested in side characters and family members and, whatever, like they want to revisit past characters. And so, and she was like, yeah, that's true. But until you have like a proven track record with readers that you will finish something, like they're not going to be willing to go on that journey with you. And I'm like, that's fair. Did I listen to that advice? Halfway. I did not put on when Langpipe came out in the summer of 2020. It did not say that it was the first in a series on it. People immediately asked, is there going to be a book for this character? Is there going to be a book for this character? But and I was like, there sure will be. Stay tuned.
Right.
So, but like not putting it on there, I think maybe I don't know, maybe helped a little bit. At least it helped me feel like I was listening to this very thoughtful advice that this author took the time to reach out and give to me. But you want to make your own mistakes.
Yeah, and sometimes, I think sometimes something that like is sage advice in one context may not always be applicable. Like sometimes you can be the outlier. You've got to make those choices yourself. Because the flip side too is like you don't want to be the person who follows some advice that your gut was telling you, no, I shouldn't do this. But this seems like, oh, this other person knows so much more. And then it doesn't work out well in the way that you want, So, I mean,
I can't even imagine how burnt out I would have gotten if I had just written the KP books. Like, and they would have been very different, I feel like, than how, especially the last 3. Because I've grown so much as an author. Like every book you put out, you learn something. Like you learn something new about your style, about what your readers like, about you know, just the way to compose a story you can learn. And so I definitely feel like I'm proud of that first book, but like if I reread it, I'm like, this is real wordy. Kiki, what's happening here? Like I could have easily cut like 5,000 to 10,000 words out of that book. And so like, and each time after that, like I said, you're learning stuff. So I definitely think that, I don't know, I think especially for me, like you said, it fills my creative well to be able to do other things.
Yeah.
They're not always super successful. And it definitely is like, okay, yeah, time to get back to those shifters because they pay the bills. But it still is good for me and keeping me motivated and wanting to actually do it. I mean, it's the best job in the world, but it still can get like, oh God.
Job is still a job.
Exactly. Once you start making money, then it's just not for fun anymore. You got to think about the business side. And
yeah, I've thought about that because I'm still only part-time. I have a day job, and like, I've thought about if I'm ever at a point where I can go full-time, how is that going to impact how I view all of this, and in both good and bad ways, right? So yeah. Well, I know we talked a little bit about kind of planning and, outlining and things like that, but do your books, would you say they spring first from like a character or an idea or a setting? Like what sort of is the germination process for you when it comes to stories?
So especially for first in series books, it is an idea. It is generally the opening scene. That is what will like seed the idea. If you I was trying to play on the germinate things.
Virtual high five.
But that's usually what will like pop into my head. A little bit of dialogue, or with the Kincaid Pack books, the first one, it changed. Like the original idea was like this alpha wolf like finding this young man being held hostage by like his family or whatever, and like buys him to save him.
Oh wow, okay.
In the KP, like this isn't a spoiler for anyone who hasn't read it, it's literally the opening scene. But instead, it is he just saves them. There is no buying of people. That was a little too dark for what I actually ended up wanting to do. But so it definitely like it was still very, very similar. And it's the same with a lot of others. Once I'm starting a series, I'll have the character there. I know, okay, like the second book is these 2 characters.
Sure.
Readers already know them, so I don't necessarily have that like meet cute moment at the very beginning, so it can be a little bit more difficult. So it starts more with the characters the further into the series it gets. Unless you're introducing a new character, then you can kind of play with that a little bit more. But so I guess it's both. Like I said, it's like for first in series, it's generally the idea, that original meeting, that, start off with a bang first scene. But then after that, I have to come up with that all on my own from my brain because I already know the characters. I'm like, okay, this has to happen. So how can I make that happen?
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I think like we said, it's very different from each person to each person, and it's just
Yeah.
always fascinating to hear different people's process and starting point and how they go along with that. But obviously, writing is a collaborative process in the sense that you have to work with people like editors and cover artists. And I know, readers are often really drawn to a compelling cover. So
Yeah.
how do you approach covers for your indie stories? Do you make them yourself? Do you work with an artist? And kind of like, what do you sort of want to focus on in that?
So I am very not good at that kind of artistry. Like if I tried to make my own covers, they would be horrible. Like I can't even I like it terrifies me just to think about if I had to do that. Like, no, I am not skilled. So generally, I am more than willing to listen to the cover designer who was like, this is what I think we should do. And I'm like, that sounds great. You're the expert. I remember I had an idea recently for a cover. And because I'll like peruse models and stuff. Sometimes I find like my own models on stock photo sites, or if I'm gonna purchase an exclusive photo, like I'll find that or whatever. But like I'll leave the rest of it up to them. But I had found this model and I sent it to the designer, and she was like, she put it on there, and she was like, so here's the mock-up. Here's why I don't think we should use it. Like broke down what the issues were. And like once I saw it on there, and I'm like, you're right. It was a very static photo. The lighting was kind of weird. Like there was a lot of issues with it. I'm like, but on the website, just looking at it, I'm like, oh, he's very attractive. Like he's got like a very like scowly, serious face. Like I was very drawn to him. But actually, as a cover model, it did not work. And so I am very, very willing to listen to the experts. Same with editing and stuff like that. Like my editor's like, this is bad. Or not that she would ever say, but she's just like, I think this is what you're trying to say. It is not coming across that way. I'll be like, okay, then I need to change this.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter if I think it's the best sentence in the entire world. If a reader can't understand what I'm saying, it's useless. It is a useless sentence. Same with a cover. If it doesn't sell the story, it is a waste of money. Like that is the first thing people see. You have to trust the experts.
For sure. I share a similar kind of lack of artistic. I always wanted to be artistically inclined.
Same.
I tried so hard, and no. I mean, I do think it's
gotten better. Like I make a lot of my own graphics and stuff. I have gotten better from book one to now. But like it has very much been this lengthy learning process and looking at what other people do and going, I like that. How can I? And it takes me forever. Like I am so fidgety with stuff because I'm like a perfectionist with things like that. I'm like, if it looks bad, I don't want it out there representing me and my brand in my book. So it'll take me hours to create like 2 graphics. And then I'm like, now I'm exhausted.
Well, and if BookBrush and Canva didn't exist, I'd be screwed. Because
oh my god, I wouldn't even try that.
There's no way I could figure out InDesign, like that kind of thing.
Like, so just use Photoshop, and I'm like, excuse me, I don't know what that means.
No, so you start talking about layers, and I'm like glazing over, like what?
Yes. Oh my god, no, I would,
Okay, so I have to ask you, this is kind of like a follow-up question because I'm fascinated by this because something happened to me recently. Have you ever bought a pre-made cover? Because I bought one recently. I was like, for the longest time, I was like, I would never buy a pre-made because like my stuff is like really too quirky and offbeat that it's just not going to match a generic. Right. But then my cover artist had a sale and she had the most offbeat cover. Nobody else was.
I feel like I know what cover you're talking about.
I have to buy this. They gave me an idea, and now I have like a plan for a 7-book series based on this one cover.
Oh my god!
So, So I'm always fascinated because I know some authors who are like, "Oh yeah, I've got like 50 of them, like sitting here." So where do you fall in that?
I don't have 50. I have more than I am comfortable admitting to. And some of them I've had since before I started publishing. Like in 2019, I started buying pre-mades because I was like, I'm being an author. I am becoming an author. And so I started following a couple of different designers and I brought a couple of pre-mades. I have used pre-mades. The original cover for Lang Pipe was a pre-made. I have since remade it. And it now has an exclusive photo on it. But Favor, it was a pre-made.
Okay.
And then the two covers for the second and third book in that trilogy, the designer like made to match it. What else? I feel like there's another one that Reckless, my first Leather and Crow. That was a pre-made. I bought on sale for like $50.
No way.
Yeah. Like it had been sitting on the designer's website for a while. I don't even know how long. I think that was a 2019 purchase. And I had like gotten an email like, oh, everything on the site is however much off. Yeah. And so I was like, well, I'll look. And I saw this and I'm like, hello, sir. Like, I'm like, how has this not been snapped up? And so I bought it. And when I started writing Reckless, and it was supposed to just be like a palette cleanser, like a standalone one-off, Yeah. And as I'm writing it, I'm like, well, this is obviously going to turn into a series. And so I like reached out to the designer. I was like, can you make like some more based on, and she's like, absolutely. So for every pre-made that I have bought and used, I have also had to buy more for that series. Like,
I know.
I have a couple that I'm planning on using, and I'm making sure they're staying standalones because I was like, I have to use these covers. That is money I've spent.
Right.
It's so ridiculous. Like, oh my God. A friend of mine, we were talking about it the other day, because I was like, do you think I should buy these? It was like a trilogy set. And she was like, well, what would you use them for? I'm like, well, I got this vague idea of, she's like, I don't know. Like, when do you think you'll actually, and I'm like, I don't know. I just bought them. And she was like, how many pre-made covers do you have? And I was like, I don't know. And I went and counted and I told her, and she was like, you're not allowed to buy anymore. And I'm like, you think you're the first one to tell me that? I don't listen to no one.
Yeah, I mean, I think the temptation is high. Like,
they're so good. And you're like, oh, I could write something like that. And a lot of times I'm like, maybe it won't work for a series, but it could work for a magnet or, some sort of freebie or something like that. Right. You don't want to necessarily pay full cover price for something that you're going to give away for free, but you still want a nice cover for it. Yeah. And so I have several. I'm like, oh, I'll use that for a freebie. Have I? No. But it in theory could happen. Yes. Right. Yeah. The ones I'm using right now, I've been using them for a while. They're getting stale. Gonna have to come up with some new stuff. Like,
right. Yeah. I mean, I think my problem is that I'm finding I am not really a standalone writer. A series writer all the way, and I'm a reader that way too. I rarely read standalones. I'm more of a series. I like to be deeply invested, immersed in the whole thing, multiple books. Like that's just how I read as well. So I think that often translates into kind of what we write. But I'm gonna try
and do some standalones.
Fingers crossed.
I feel like it's good to have like a diverse backlist.
It's true.
And sometimes people just want to try you out without the expectation that then they will have to read the rest of the series, especially if you do long series. So I'm like, I feel like it would be a good idea. But yeah, basically, like I was talking to Em about Em Lindsay, and like they were like, you have to do like no friends, like, or like lesbians as the friends, because otherwise anyone you put in anywhere in the vicinity of the main characters, readers are going to be like, oh, this character, they can be on the page for 30 seconds and they'll be like, so what's the story with so-and-so? Like when's their story coming?
Right. Yeah.
Oh my God. So yeah. Yes, they have no friends. Like
That's awesome.
they're a lone wolf who just sits at home. Oh, yeah,
Well,
it's hard. It's hard.
I know. Yes, I sympathize. We did have some audience questions
Oh
about
yes. Okay.
writing as
Mhm, mhm.
well. So one of our audience members asked, "What do you do to keep your finger on the market's pulse as a writer?"
Oh, that is difficult
Mm,
for two reasons. Well, no, okay. Let me say that the way that I try and stay on top of the market is to try and read
yeah.
what is popular.
Mm,
And the way I don't always necessarily go off like the top 100 on Amazon.
oh, sure.
Sometimes I will, or if it's an author who's already popular, you know, and they have something coming out that's taking off, and I'm like, okay, well, what's different about this series that so many readers are liking it and wanting more of it, you know. And but I also try and pay attention to there are several like Instagrammers that I follow
Oh, sure.
that like they have bookstagram accounts,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that they will get like excited about something. And that's how I found the Gray Bryan, I think
Oh,
is her name.
yeah. Mhm.
She's a newer author. I kept seeing all over Instagram, all like these bookstagrammers talking about
Yeah.
her Vampire Mates or whatever series. And
Okay.
so I was like, you know what? And it was hitting like the top 100 list too. So I was like, there's obviously something there. And
Mm,
so I recently like read the entire series, sent Gray a message and was like, when's the next one coming? Like they were very good. And so, but it also said to me, okay, vampires are coming back
yeah.
because it's getting so popular. There are several other authors who have done vampire books that have
Mm,
done very well. And so I'm like, okay, trying to pay attention and paying attention to what gets requested in that big book rec group.
mm,
That's not always an accurate way
yeah.
to like, because sometimes it's people will ask for the most random things and you're like,
Right.
that's not a thing. Like that's not a thing out there. Like, but if you're seeing people ask over and over and over again for low inks books, for daddy kink books, for
Mm,
shifters that aren't NPreg, you know, if you're seeing it over and over again, then to me it's you can fill a need, whether it might not be the hottest trend at the
yeah.
moment.
Mm,
I write too slow to try and like
yeah.
chase the trends, like so. But I I feel like for me, because I try and keep up on what is popular, like reading stuff and being like, okay, I can see why this is doing popular right now. Like for a
Yeah.
long time, 2020, 2021, everybody wanted low ink stuff because the world was terrible. But
Yeah.
I've been seeing more and more people wanting more angstier things.
Mhm.
They want a little bit more of that tear your heart out because things are getting a little bit better for them, you know? So that's kind of it is difficult, but that is how I try and do it. I try and pay attention to what is being asked for on social media, what people are talking about on social media,
Mm,
um as well as kind of like what's in the top 100. I do not obviously have enough time to read everything that hits
mm.
the top, like every week.
Oh,
But even if you can't read it, just kind of keeping an eye on what it is, because a lot of people they'll include like in the blurb what the tropes are,
yeah.
you know. And so if you can kind of keep, I know people who do spreadsheets keeping track of
Oh, wow.
what is in like the top 25 to top 50,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
and what kind of what tropes those are, what themes those are, like as best you can without reading every single book,
Mm,
what the price is, you know, what the cover
right.
looks like, kind of thing, so that they can very very closely follow the trends and try and make sure that they're hitting them. So
Mhm.
that, like I said, if you're a slower writer like I am, it is a little bit more difficult to to hit something that is only trending for a little while. But a lot of times things will like dark romance.
Mm-hmm.
It hits an MF first and then seeps into MM.
That's where I
And
do a lot of my research is I watch TikTok actually, because there's a lot more TikTok like book talk people for het romance than LGBTQ. I mean, I follow some, but it's still small, tiny portion. But it's very fascinating to see a lot of the trends that happen in MF eventually make their way over to MM. Same thing happened with bully romance, dark romance. You know, my new series is going to be a monster romance series.
Monster romance is very big right now.
Moved over. Now I'm going a slightly different direction in that, like in het romance, there's a subcategory that's more of the like lighter, funnier monster rom-com kind of thing, and that's more what I'm planning to do because I don't really do dark per se. There are authors who are doing the dark, so I'm like, oh well, maybe I can, you know, appeal to people who want kind of monster, but like monster light. You know, and we'll see what happens. But I think sometimes looking at those trends in other areas of romance to see where they'll come over is really useful for sure.
Yep, exactly. And because it's usually, you know, like a year or so later. Like 12 to 18 months a lot of times is okay, it's now coming to MM or, you know, what are people looking for over there, and then can you hit that over here before it gets really like what Lily Mayne did, hitting your monster romance in MM before anybody else even was talking about it.
Like that, or like Only James and like the psychopath.
Exactly. Like if you can hit it before it's even hot, like you can cause the trend.
Right. And I mean, you know, it's always interesting to see then what will become what we, you know, like evergreen versus kind of more sporadic. And so very cool. Well, okay, so another question. I have to be honest, I'm not sure exactly what context this is in, but they ask, have you ever had to change course or start fresh? I'm guessing maybe with a book or a series or possibly your pen name. I don't know.
I'm going to take it in the context of a single book. Like if I'm writing a book and I had to change course, which yes. For one of my Leather and Chrome books, it was funny because I think it was part of being influenced by what I felt was becoming very popular in darker stuff. And so the book was Yearning, the fourth one. Third one, I don't know. It's technically the third one, even though it came out fourth. That's a whole other thing. That was a whole other mistake that Kiki made. But the point is that I was writing it and I was trying to make it a little bit, without really thinking about it, trying to make it a little bit more darker. Like it was like originally there was going to be like a little bit more violence and like retribution kind of thing, like how dare you touch what's mine kind of vibe to it. It could have been because I was reading on these books at the time. And so it just kind of like was seeping in, and I was like halfway through this book and I'm like, it is not working. Like I'm like, what is happening? Like why isn't this coming together? And then I'm like rereading it and I'm like, oh, because I'm like trying to sprinkle in this like darkness and then like my natural inclination of doing more light. And not like that series isn't necessarily fluffy. It's a little too kinktastic for that, but it definitely isn't like super dark and gritty. And so it's like the idea in my head was fighting with like my actual like writing, like the words coming out. So it came out very disjointed. So I had to go back and edit things a little bit, like change a few things and then change the direction that the book was going to go. Less murder, more rope play.
I'm
So
sure the readers had no problem with that.
and people seemed pretty happy with it. But yeah, that immediately, that is the first thing I think, because that book gave me a very hard time, and it was my fault because I was trying to turn it into something that it wasn't. So
that makes sense.
otherwise, I feel like usually around the 40% mark, I feel like it is garbage and I need to rewrite an entire book. I have learned to just keep writing.
Yeah.
And then usually when I'm about 75% done, I'll like go back and reread like certain parts and be like, I feel like this was weak. And then I'm rereading and I'm like, no, it's not. It just needed to be more well formed. And so once I'm actually like close to being done or done, then I'm like, okay, it's not garbage. Yeah. But every single book that happens, like 40-50%, I'm like, it ain't happening. It's not coming together. It's not.
The imposter syndrome is real for writers. Real. Which actually is I guess a good segue into kind of the final two questions I had from our outside listener, reader, follower, was what piece of advice would you give to a newbie author, and what about a mid-list author who wants to take their career to the next step?
So for a newbie author, I would say my advice is going to be more business oriented than book oriented, because I feel like for a newbie, if you don't know how to write the book, that's in and of itself a different problem. Like there are a lot of craft books out there to like learn, but if you've got a book and you're like, okay, what do I do now? Do not skimp on editing. Pay a professional. Do not skimp on a cover. Even if you have skills, I always caution people against making their own covers, because just because you have an artistic ability, just because you've worked in marketing or design or whatever, doesn't mean you know what is popular right now in romance. And that is that cover designer's job, is to know what is popular and to get people to look at your cover and then your book in general. Get at least 2 other people to read it before it goes to editing, like beta readers. If you have to pay somebody, then pay somebody. If you don't, because not everybody has author friends when they're first starting. So, but there are people who provide that service for a small fee. Take their feedback. You don't have to take every single piece of feedback because it's your story. At the end of the day, you make the decision, but listen to what they're saying. If both people are saying contradicting thing, get a third person, and make sure your story is as strong as it can possibly be. And then make sure you have a newsletter from the get-go. I will tell every single person I talk to, well, every author. I don't talk to like people on the street about it, but every single author that I talked, well, I might talk to people on the street about it. That's another thing. I'm very passionate about newsletters.
Love it.
Never start publishing without a newsletter. If you did, that's fine. Course correct right now. It is, and people are like, I don't know what to put in my newsletter. Babe, there are a million things that you can send out to your readers. They just want to know what's going on. And I know people will be like, oh, I only send out when I have a new release and I only release a couple of times a year. Don't do that, because people are going to forget about you. They're going to forget they signed up for your newsletter. Send at least once a month. Give updates on what you're doing. Let them know about sales. Let them know about freebies that are available. Let them know about a book you just read. Let them know. Like, it doesn't matter. Just at least once a month, get in their inbox so that they're remembering you.
Right.
And then I have a lot of other advice about newsletters, but it gets very technical. Like about segmenting and doing automations. For another interview. Yes. Totally. Okay. Next time we'll talk about that. For a mid-list, I don't know. I feel like I'm a mid-list, so I I guess the biggest thing is to keep creating a bigger backlist.
Yeah.
If your backlist isn't selling, figure out why.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people are like, oh, I just need to get more and more books, but more and more books that don't sell aren't going to help you. They're not going to help you level up.
Yeah.
Like you need to make sure that they're actually providing sales, so that if you have like a burnout, like I didn't write like anything the second half of 2022. I was so burnt out. I couldn't do anything. But having that backlist of 12, 13 books, whatever, has kept me afloat and has kept me being able to pay my bills as I've been able to get back into things. So it is very, very important to have a backlist that works for you. And if it doesn't, figure out why. If it's the covers, if it's the blurbs, if it's the stories themselves, you don't have to necessarily go back and rewrite them, but figure out better tropes that are going to connect with readers. If leveling up to me is making more money, like, and I'm assuming that's what that person was asking, was how do I make more money? And you have to think about it more as a business and less about a passion. The passion is to be there, because readers can tell if you're just churning out books to get it out there. They're gonna be like, this is terrible, I don't like it, and they're going to stop reading you. Right. But you have to be making smart business decisions, also investing in better covers, investing in a second editor or second proofer, investing in audio so you can diversify your backlist, investing in translations. And there are also a lot of like different like conventions and stuff where you can go and you can learn about marketing and advertising and stuff. Sure. I'm hesitant to ever recommend anything that is not LGBTQ romance oriented, because so many things do not apply. That, in MF, they can run $10,000 a month in Facebook ads and make $50,000. You can't do that in our genre. Like you can't, you're lucky. Like there are some people who have been able to have some mild success with Facebook ads. Yeah. But it's when you're against a semi-homophobic system, it gets very difficult. Agreed. Same with Amazon. Doing Amazon ads can be very difficult to gain any kind of traction. I have given up on Amazon ads because my covers tend to be a little too racy for them. And so even though the books aren't in the erotica category, they're like, no, your covers are too sexual. And I'm like, because there's a shirtless dude on them. Like, stop being a prude, Amazon. Right. Don't show them to children then. Like, I don't, like, what do you want from me? But I mean, and there are other ways to advertise and stuff like that. But yeah, I think diversifying with audio, with translations, with tropes, subgenres, trying to hit things that are more popular. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like it takes one really good series to take you up to that next level. Yeah. Like you look at like Kylene, who's doing pretty well, and then her Four Bears series came out and exploded, and that to me that took her to the next level. And I think that's how it is for a lot of authors. Like you have a certain series that it just connects, readers connect to it. That's what they want in that moment. And sometimes you can kind of predict it, a lot of times you can't. Like it's just hitting stuff.
But like Journey famously sang, don't stop believing.
That's true. Like, yes, keep working, keep hoping, keeping your nose to the grindstone.
Right. It's tough. It is. Well, I want to make sure we have some time to talk a little bit about your latest release, The Witch and His Doctor. So this is rounding out, concluding the Kincaid Pack series. Tell us a little bit about it and what you found perhaps hardest about writing this book.
Okay, so like I said, it's the last one in the Kincaid Pack series. It's not going to be the last in the Kincaid Pack universe. Like that's
Oh,
definitely getting expanded with some
cool.
spin-offs and stuff. But it is wrapping up this series arc.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of questions have been left unanswered. The fifth book had quite the cliffhanger ending that readers were very upset about, and it fueled my soul. Like the more angry emails I got about it, the more excited I got. I'm like, people are really excited.
Yeah.
They'd be like, I hate you. How could you do this? And I'm like, yes. Feel the passion. So the sixth book is essentially answering a lot of questions that have come up throughout the series, while also providing the sweet love story between Doc, who's been a character since the beginning, and Damien's been there. He's the witch. He's been there since the beginning, but he's very much in the background.
Mm.
But I always knew that him and Doc were going to be the last
Oh,
book.
wow.
So they were supposed to be book 5, but then like these other characters popped up and were like, hey. And I was like, okay, you guys can be book 5 and I'll move Doc and Damien to book 6. So it learning, like we learn a lot more about Damien's past, how he came to be in the Kincaid Pack, how he ended up. I don't want to spoil things for people, but there is a lot that people do not know about him and his circumstances, and I anticipate some tears.
Emotional roller coaster. Okay.
Yes. And I definitely, the most difficult thing about writing this book has been trying to make sure it is a satisfying ending for this series.
Yeah.
Because there have been, like, the readers of this series are so amazing and they're so invested in these characters and in this pack and this world, and I want to do them justice. And so balancing the story plot with the romance of these two characters has been difficult, and then just making sure that the ending is satisfying.
Yeah.
Because no, I'm not. I was going to say something. I was like, no, that's too close to a spoiler.
That's okay.
But yes, that I would say that has been. Yes, there's gonna be a lot revealed. There's a lot of like little Easter eggs to the last book too. I introduced characters that are going to be for spin-off books, and like there's another one in this book that gets introduced, and he's like not necessarily a good guy. You're like, wait, who is this dude? And I'm very excited to write his book. But yeah, so it has been terrifying and very satisfying at the same time, like writing this book.
Right. Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of a huge milestone.
It is.
You mentioned sort of like the readers of the series. And so I just want to kind of like preface this by letting our listeners know, I think sometimes readers don't fully appreciate how meaningful it is when they reach out to us as authors to tell us how much they enjoyed something that we wrote. Sometimes they're nervous about doing it. There's all kinds of reasons why they sometimes say like, oh, I felt too intimidated to do something. But I just want to kind of let you know that like, this is like sometimes the lifeblood for authors. Like it keeps us going when we get these kinds of wonderful messages.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, in your case, what is maybe one of the more heartfelt things a reader has said to you about this series?
Yeah, so I've gotten a lot of messages, and I always appreciate when someone's like, especially at like a female character, like, oh, is so and so getting a book? And to me, I'm like, that means a lot to me, that like for a series that has been an MMM in one of the stories, but for people to be even invested in other characters means a lot to me. But the most meaningful comment I got probably was at GRL last year.
Ooh.
After my panel. A person came up to me and said that it meant so much to them that my character Drake, who lost his arm in an explosion in the first book, that he didn't magically get a new one. He was never magically fixed.
Yeah.
By the time his book came around, like, he's still in like therapy and stuff for his PTSD. He's still doing his occupational therapy to relearn how to do things and stuff. And so I tried to be very true to what that would have been like for that character, and for her to say that it really resonated with her and experiences that she had personally, and that she really appreciated that. I'm like, to me, like, that's the kind of feedback that you take home and you hold on to, and it fuels you, like, because you put so much into the characters, and for it to resonate so much with somebody, you know, especially a character like that who meant so much to me. Like, you know, I was real mean to him and like, hurt him, but like, you know, then he was like precious little baby that like, you know, I wanted to like take care of, and you know, so like he ended up meaning a lot to me too. And so for him to have meant so much to this person, for her to say how much she appreciated the character arc that I gave him and the story that I gave him, it really meant a lot. And like you said, any messages from readers are so amazing. Like,
take note, readers.
Yes. Oh my God. The more the merrier. Like, it can be, especially because it can be so isolating. Sitting at home, writing your stuff. Like, you might have like some author friends that like you talk to occasionally, but for a lot of us, like, it's just us and our computers. And so getting those messages lets us know we're not just like screaming into the void. I mean, you have like the money that you get or whatever, but you don't know if people are just like, yeah, they're all right, or if they're like, yes, I've loved it. You know, and so getting those messages. I have this bookstagrammer messaged me recently and told me that she was absolutely feral for the last book in the series. And I have never, like, that, I was so pleased with that message. I'm like, this is fantastic. I've like never had anyone say anything like that to me before, and would never have thought to describe myself that way. But it was fantastic. I was like, yes, thank you. I hope you're not disappointed.
Right. No pressure now.
Right. That is the one downside, is every time you get like, oh, I'm so excited for like, okay, that's just another drop of pressure on the scale. Like,
balancing that can be tricky. But in the writing process, as readers probably sort of know, often we as authors have to conduct a little bit of research during this process. So was there anything kind of weird or unusual that you ended up having to Google for this book?
So this book, like most of the other Kincaid Pack books, I ended up having to do a little bit of research on animal genitalia. Not because there's bestiality. Everyone get your mind out of the gutters. Because I made the choice from the beginning, because there are different kinds of shifters in this series. Like the first one, they're both wolves, right? Yeah. So, you know, knots are the traditional like that. But for the next one, it was a wolf and a tiger. And I was like, well, like, I feel like it doesn't make sense for a tiger to have one. Like, so I did some research on, you know, cats, big cats. And like, so yes, it has, that's always the weirdest thing I have to research for this series. I learned things like bears have bones in their
Wow.
And that, you know, I learned all about birds and their interesting stuff that's going on. So yeah, 100%. That is the weirdest.
Love it. Love it. You know, I mean, I think a lot of writers often joke about like how if somebody checked their search history on their computer
Yeah.
that they use for writing, they might be
Yeah.
disturbed about the like sheer variety of weirdness that we're looking up on various.
100%. There have definitely been, like with my leather and Chromebooks, like the research is more kink based. So
Yeah.
like with the one with the rope play and stuff, like I even bought a book
Yeah.
so
Wow.
that I could like see like the different designs, if you will, that
Yeah.
can be done. And I follow riggers on Instagram and stuff to see like the different rope stuff that they do. And but yeah, it definitely, I don't know, it's definitely can be very enlightening. Like I learned something new with like every book.
Right.
Sometimes it's not stuff that you can bring out at dinner parties, and sometimes it is. Uh, just kind of depends on the book.
Mhm, mhm.
So yeah.
Well, we are getting close to the end here. I have many more questions we could ask,
Oh,
but we'll
we can
save
do.
that for
I was gonna say
another.
we could do them fast. I can try and be quicker.
No, it's all good. I think I'll ask you a question I tend to like to ask most of my guests, especially those who write in the genre. We write about love a lot, and we write about, obviously, romance in books is different than romance in real life a lot of the time, especially with the paranormal. But do you believe in the notion of love at first sight?
um, in real life, no. Like, in real life, I am very much like a like pessimistic person.
Oh,
Um,
I wouldn't have
and
guessed that, but okay.
well, like, certain things, relationship stuff. So I am definitely like, I think you can be immensely attracted to somebody
Sure.
at
Lust at
first
first
sight.
sight is definitely.
Yes. And I think that as long as there are other things that you have in common to build on, that can turn into love.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I might write insta love, but I don't necessarily believe in it. Which I know for some people, like, oh, I knew the day I met my husband, or I knew the second I met my wife that I was going to marry them. I'm like, that's great, but that wasn't love.
Right.
At least in my opinion, like, like, so yeah, I know that's not very like romance authory of me. I'm like, eh.
Well, but I think the fantasy, I mean, I think there's a reason why there's a fascination with the fantasy of like
Yes,
the love that many
yes,
romances, not all of them, but many utilize that trope.
yeah,
Because I think it's not something a lot of people actually experience in reality, but then the
no,
idea
yeah.
is lovely on some levels, right?
Yeah. Yes. The idea that you're so instantly connected to another person that you never
Yeah,
want to spend another day apart. They
right,
understand you on a level that nobody else ever has. Like
right,
that is the fantasy.
right.
Not
Yeah. That
necessarily
you kind
reality, but that is the
of work
fantasy.
for.
Yes, yes. They're like, oh, that would be fantastic. But there's a lot of creepers out there in the dating app world. So
Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? My
you
God.
gotta be careful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Kiki, it has been a delight talking with you. I hope we can do this again at some point.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
do like to end by having my guests kind of tell readers a little bit, what you can anyway, about what can they expect ahead this year, and where can they find you online if they're looking to find more information.
Sure. So the Witch and His Doctor is coming out May 16th. The next book that I have coming out will be the next one in the Blue Collar Heart series.
Okay.
So that's going to be the long anticipated sequel to Laying Pipe called
Nice.
Banger. And it's gonna be a little enemies to lover kind of a little bit. We'll see how enemy-y they end up turning out to be. And then I want to do the third and final book in the Forever Family trilogy, which is a series of novellas. They're very lighthearted and found family and stuff. So super cute if anybody wants to like try me out, but not like jump into a 300-page book. Like that might be a good series for them. And then I want to do the first spin-off from the Kincaid Peck universe, and it's going to be my intent is to do a standalone for the character that I mentioned. He comes up in the beginning of this last book. He's only talked to you on the phone. You don't even meet him, but he intrigued me enough that I was like, yeah. And I will say it's going to be my first mafia romance, and nice. and probably a little bit darker than I traditionally write, but not extensively dark or anything like that, and still have a lot of the same, like fated mate aspects and different stuff, things that people have come to love in the KP books will still be present there. It'll just be a little bit different because of who he is and what he does. So there might be some surprises also this year, but for now, that is my intention. And people can find me. I'm on Instagram, and I am on Facebook, and I have a Facebook reader group that I'm not super active in, but it is there, and I do try and post things and answer questions. And the best way to stay on top of anything that I have coming out, and freebies and all kinds of fun stuff, is to make sure that you're signed up for my newsletter. Which you can do on my website, which is kikiclark.com. So
okay, perfect. And we'll put those links in the show notes for readers and everything. So yes, thank you so much, Kiki, for being here. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. Until next month, this is me signing off.
Bye.